So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And welcome. I am very glad that you are with us today to talk about the biotechnology revolution. My name is Tammy McLeod, and I am the president and CEO of the Flinn Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with the Flinn Foundation, we are a private grant-making foundation based here in Phoenix with a mission of improving the quality of life in Arizona. We were established in 1965 as a foundation that was largely focused on healthcare. And in fact, our benefactor, Dr. Robert Flinn, who was a cardiologist at St. Joe's Hospital, was also the house doctor here at the Arizona Biltmore Hotel for years. So you may have not know that fun fact, but it may get you a trivia prize one day. Today, our primary interest is that of the biosciences. We provide grants for biomedical research and for medical education. We also do seed funding for translational research that partners scientists together with clinicians. And we also support biotech entrepreneurs and the broader bio-focused economic development. Since 2002, we have sponsored Arizona's Bioscience Roadmap. That is a statewide strategic plan to help the sector achieve global prominence. And we're also told that that is the longest serving statewide strategic plan for biosciences in the nation. The panel that we have today has three experts in this biotech space. We're going to bring up here in just a moment Dr. Mohammad Albanna. He is a PhD, CEO and founder of Humabiologics. Dr. Richard Gray, CEO of Mayo Clinic, Arizona, and Dr. Kenneth Knox, who is the Dean of Faculty Affairs, University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix. Each one of these panelists has a very unique perspective: academic research, medical education, healthcare and hospital systems, and biotech entrepreneurship. And I'm going to ask them all to take a moment at the start to introduce themselves so you can learn a little bit more about them. But I want to emphasize how much the biotech sector is so dependent on all three of their perspectives and their roles. And the future of biotechnology, especially here in Phoenix, really relies on these three domains working collaboratively. And so I think that what you're about to hear is that that is exactly what they do. So I will invite our panelists up to the stage now. So good afternoon and welcome. It's great to have all of you here. I'll have each of you take a moment, starting with you, Dr. Albanna.
Glad to be here. My name is Mohammad Albanna. I'm the CEO and founder of Humabiologics, one of the only companies in the world that provides human-derived biomaterials for regenerative medicine applications. We partner with tissue banks to obtain the tissue that is not going to be used for transplant and find an avenue for it to be used for the betterment of human patients and quality of their lives. I was trained in regenerative medicine, worked over the last 20 years in mid-device industry, blood banking, tissue banking, and recently taken the journey on entrepreneurship with Humabiologics.
Thank you. And Dr. Gray?
Yes, and I'm Rick Gray, and I am a surgical oncologist by background. I've been with Mayo Clinic for 28 years and have been in the CEO role here in Arizona for the past 5 years. Mayo Clinic, many people are familiar with, but we have missions in patient care, education, and research. We're proud to be ranked by numerous publications as the #1 healthcare organization in the United States and in the world. And it's an incredible privilege to be part of Mayo Clinic.
Thank you. And Dr. Knox, please.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Ken Knox. I'm a professor and vice dean at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix. I'm a practicing pulmonary critical care and sleep physician at Banner University Medical Group, and I'm on the steering committee for one of our signature centers, the Center for Advanced Molecular and Immunologic Therapies, which will be downtown on the Phoenix Bioscience Core.
Great. Thank you so much. We've prepared a few questions today, but I'm going to invite my panelists to chime in on any of the topics that they're familiar with or would like to address with all of you. But to begin, Dr. Gray, bringing new therapeutics to the market involves extraordinary complexity. There's a lot of cost, there's a lot of time involved, and in fact, Tucson is home to the Critical Path Institute, one of our most important organizations that is taking on this issue. What makes the process of innovation different in biotech relative to other advanced technology sectors?
Well, I guess I would say at core, it's different because we're dealing with people, and it's not only complex biologic science that we're dealing with, but we're dealing with sentient individuals who have agency and sometimes don't do what you would like them to do. And also because of those things, it introduces a lot of fear and risk into the process. So that leads to a very high degree of scientific complexity. Every time we have a breakthrough, it seems like there is a bigger layer of complexity that we come to next. When we've talked about precision medicine and individualized medicine, when we mapped the human genome and then we became able to do whole genome sequencing at relatively low prices, we thought that's all we need to get to. If we can get all of the genetics of, say, a tumor, and we can get all of the genetics of the person, see what's different, we'll be able to have a lot of breakthroughs. And we have, but we've also found that there's another layer of complexity. And now we talk not just about genomics, but we talk about epigenomics, and we talk about proteomics, and we talk about exposomics, which is kind of a made-up word, but it's the exposures of an individual and behavioral aspects of all of this. So scientific complexity in biologic systems is substantial, and that leads to the fact that you then have to have a lot of multidisciplinary collaborations to do all of this well. It requires clinicians, scientists, engineers, and those from multiple different specialties, different types of basic science background, different clinical backgrounds, bringing all of those people together. And then when you do have a breakthrough, oftentimes you need to test it in an organization other than your own. So now you have another collaboration. So all of these things, whenever you're dealing with people, you're going to have regulatory complexity. When you're dealing with this kind of scientific complexity and the number of collaborations, it's going to be longer development and cycle times. And that leads to all of the things that we're talking about in terms of those barriers. And so we just need to give people better tools. And thankfully, we have a lot of opportunities to improve all of that. AI is remarkably accurate at predicting protein structures, for example, at identifying the most promising targets. All of that will allow us to decrease some of this cycle time, decrease some of the complexity. But the fact is, we're starting with a very complex field.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I know is so different within this particular field is the way that funding and investment works. So Dr. Albanna, you want to talk a little bit about the difference in biotech and life science startups compared to other sectors?
Absolutely. So I think in the bioscience and the biotech in general, it's a cyclical when it comes to the funding. If you remember back in 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of loose money in the market. So basically, for companies, there was a lot of funding there. It was easy for companies actually to raise money. For example, we actually raised $1 million in less than 28 days back in 2020. 2021, we also saw an extended period of time when it comes to raising money, talking to investors. The due diligence process takes longer. The competition between the startups actually takes more. So the scrutiny of the process was actually more than just before. Now we're seeing actually that it's becoming a little bit harder because there is a shift in the investment for startup to put more money into AI or into other areas other than the biotech, or your technology needs to combine AI so you can actually get some kind of introductions to these funding agencies and work with them. But for startups, sometimes it might not be the idea that you need to go immediately to raise $1 million. I remember when we started back in 2020, we actually approached the Flinn Foundation, and it was easier for us to talk to them because they understand the requirements for a startup company, what exactly we're looking for. So it was for us as a startup that it's good to have the money, but it's more important for us to have someone to open the doors for us, connect us with other collaborators tell us about what we might need through many of the services. So that's actually what helped us to raise a couple of $1 million and to basically break even last year and be able to hire more people, and now it's easier for us to secure more funding as we go through the process.
Great. Dr. Knox, I know that at the University of Arizona, you've got a big project on the horizon that you're thinking about. We call it CAMI for short. And do you want to talk a little bit about what do policymakers need to understand about incentives to support innovation in this type of area?
Yeah, sure. CAMI, Center for Advanced Molecular and Immunologic Therapies, why we call it CAMI, is an initiative that we've undertaken at University of Arizona. So we're all in on the innovation related to cell-based therapies, vaccines for more than just viruses and cancer, but for cancers. And that's where we're putting a lot of our focus and energy. Just building the center, it's been a lot of fun. Everyone's super excited, but a lot of hard work ahead of us. And a lot of the things that we need to do is think about how we're going to collaborate and how we're going to recruit, because it's really, even though it's going to be a center, bricks and mortar downtown, it's all about the people. And so getting the right people in place is going to be very important. I wanted to digress for 1 second.
Please.
And just say that this was a very complete answer that you gave. But at the end of that rainbow, with all the technology, it's human subject research. And as you were saying, it can be very complex. And we go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. And one of the challenges, and CAMI is hopefully going to address some of these challenges, is that we rely on volunteerism. Volunteerism, any of us could be a human subject in a research trial, but it does take volunteerism. And that is another important hurdle that we have to overcome.
Thank you for adding that. So the panel represents very distinct points along the translational sciences journey, from discovery to commercialization to patient benefits. I'd like to hear from each one of you about the keys to success in the process. Is that regulatory structure, different models of collaboration, or different ways of handling intellectual property? So we'll go ahead and start here.
Yeah, I think as a small startup company, maybe we have a unique model that when growing the business, the most important thing for us as a small organization is to stay focused on the basic thing that we are trying to achieve in the market, whether it's actually the prototype or the launching of the products or expanding our market, or if our product is a medical device trying to go through the regulatory pathway, or it's as you mentioned the IP protection of that. So the most important thing for us is to make sure that you stay focused, because there is a lot of distraction along the way when you are actually trying to build a company, and you can be pulled into a lot of different directions easily, and that's where your resources, they're going to be wasted, and money and so on. The other thing is honestly for us, from our own experience, is when you are surrounded by a supporting environment, that actually saves a lot of time in terms of again, building connections, networking, or even have access to experts, physicians or end users, because at the end of the day, you can always create the best product that there is no user for it out there. So having an access to someone early in the process that can tell you, I would love to use this, but I don't see, the advantages over the current systems, or I would love to use this if it has this and that. So that's actually a great feedback that is really hard, and sometimes it's very costly to obtain. The other thing I say, about our collaboration with the University of Arizona, that we were actually looking for a lot of testing at the beginning to characterize our products, and not only that, we found the expertise actually in the University of Arizona. Instead of taking us a couple of months to get the test, we were able to do this in a couple of weeks. So sometimes actually the environment is actually a key to your success. A lot of people, they look at it for a startup that you should have plenty of money. Sometimes actually money might actually work against you, because now you have a lot of money, you have a lot of things you can do. So you start thinking about, let's do this, let's do that, versus actually making sure that I define exactly what I'm looking for, and I want to make sure I achieve that target along the journey.
Okay. Dr. Gray?
Yeah, I agree. Collaboration is extremely important, but as we think about that that complex journey that we've been all talking about here, another piece of it is just understanding the hurdles and trying to bring people alongside each step in the process to help overcome those hurdles and to help identify when you should actually stop at a hurdle and turn back instead of trying to fly over it. So, we have a number of systems in place at Mayo Clinic to try to foster this. In the end, we try to make sure that everyone is staying very connected to the patient. And it's one of the advantages we have at Mayo Clinic that our career scientists that come to Mayo Clinic, they're always connected to our clinicians, always connected to our mission. It's not a separate university associated with a healthcare organization where you have to, I think, foster those connections a little bit more intentionally than we do. So it's an advantage for us in our setup, but that's still an extremely important aspect of this is from the very beginning to keep the focus on what will be the impact on patients and how will we get it there. We have a lot of very creative people that work on things that you would never expect. The more collaborations, the more collisions, the more ingenuity that comes from that. But many times then, as those things start to come forward and we say, what do we do next? It's a little hard for people to know exactly how to make those connections. They know how to do the science, but they don't know how to take that next step. Maybe they know how to take the step in terms of translation, but how do we set it up for commercialization? As we like to tell a lot of our faculty, if you really want to impact patients, you can't sell this out of your garage. So we have to have a process to get there. And so we've created something that's called the Innovation Exchange at Mayo Clinic. And their responsibility is when there's an innovation that's come forward, they essentially act like a hotel concierge. Oh, you have a family of 4, you're interested in a French restaurant, your kids kind of act up, so you need a quiet corner. I can get you to the right place. Similar with innovators. Oh, you're trying to do this type of process. You're at this stage. You've crossed these hurdles, but not these others. Here are the resources within Mayo Clinic that we can connect you with. Here are the resources outside of Mayo Clinic we can connect you with to help know if you can move forward. And in fact, we often leverage resources outside of Mayo Clinic, especially investors, to help tell our faculty that their baby's ugly. They don't want to hear that this isn't a promising undertaking, but the best thing we can do for them sometimes is tell them fairly early on, great science, maybe something to build on, but we need to pivot a different direction because this isn't really going to translate into the patient impact that maybe you think it is. And if you want validation of that, let us bring in an investor who can talk to you and tell you what the reality is. And then all of us as scientists deal with this translational valley of doom or pit of despair or whatever you want to call it, where some of the science gets funding to a certain point. And when you're ready to put it in a clinical trial, you may be able to get funding, but that bridge in between can be difficult. And so we've created funding and support opportunities to try to bridge that gap as well. So those are a couple of examples of just understanding the process, living the process. And then many organizations have things like ours, which is Mayo Clinic Ventures, which is that last step to say, okay, now how do we actually commercialize this? Who do we partner with? How do we take this to the market? So having those support steps in a regimented way and understanding that the scientists don't want to have to deal with the regulatory burden. They don't want to have to deal with some of these things. So let's put some things along with them that can help connect the right people.
Dr. Knox, what do you think the
Can I have your card?
are?
Exactly what he said. It's daunting. I do mostly bench research and I do a little bit of translational. And it's daunting for a physician scientist to think about what's the next step in moving this along. University of Arizona has stepped up to the plate and other universities have as well, where we have a tech launch Arizona, and these offices are just vital in overcoming some of those hurdles. But I could use some of your infrastructure if you're willing to share that.
Let's talk.
Okay, good.
Let's talk.
It's great. You see collaboration and action right here.
That's right.
This is what we're looking for. So you've talked a little bit. I've heard the words AI. I heard immunotherapies. We've seen other technologies like CRISPR that we're hearing about. What do you see as the most transformative trends over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, and how will that impact patient care?
I'll speak from our field. I think the technologies that you mentioned about the CRISPR, those are all promising technologies. But one of the technologies that actually we are working on, in addition to the idea that one day you can actually 3D bioprint human tissues and organs, I think the idea of having organs or tissues on demand is fascinating in the sense that one day we might actually not need to use tissues donated from other donors or humans, or even using animal tissues. We can actually with a click we can get to the point that we can make a blood vessel with certain diameter, certain mechanical properties, certain even biological properties that actually can be personalized to the patient. So the field of actually bioprinting human tissues and organs is actually now expanding with the promise that one day we can actually deliver tissues and organs on demand. The bioprinting also opened another door that we actually call it the organ on a chip, where we can actually model a function of a human organ like the liver, for example, in the lab, do actually tiny organs that we can actually use to screen drugs. So instead of actually going with the process that we have thousands of drug candidates, and now we have to do a lot of animal studies and wait weeks and months to get the data, and on top of that realize after that the moment we reach clinical trial that 92% of the drugs that they are shown to be safe in animals, they fail immediately in phase 1 clinical trial. So for cancer drugs is actually even 96%. And if you look at it, it makes a lot of sense, because we actually create the cancer model in an animal, and then we pretend what is this? Oh, this is cancer. Let's try to solve it. So that's why our drugs, they fail at the end of the day. Apart from the fact that there is actually different physiological physiology between the animal models and the human model. So the idea with the organ on a chip that I can actually model the liver in the lab, I can have those tiny organs that I can screen multiple of drugs immediately and see what's the toxicity level of that drug. I can actually put next to that liver model the heart model and see what's going to be the impact of that drug, not only on the liver, but also on the heart or other organs in the human body. You can actually take this step, this actually process one step forward and look at for example, cancer patients. Every cancer is different. Every cancer patient is different. So the idea that I can take biopsy from the patient, grow their actually cancer in the lab, put it back in the same environment, and then test what is the appropriate chemo or radiation drugs that I need to use on that patient, and basically try different treatments and choose the best dose for them, so I don't have to subject my patients to severe treatments when we know at the end of the day it might not work for them. So we see a lot of actually personalized medicine in that area, where regenerative medicine combines cells, biomaterials together and create these models for us, not only to understand how diseases works, how they progress and so on, but also find quick and more cost-effective treatments.
What would you add to that?
Yeah, I agree with those. I think those are very promising fields. I guess I would add a few. One, I mentioned omics or multi-omics. Now that we have a stronger foundation in genomics and we're better understanding some of these other factors, epigenetics, proteomics, or the proteins that are produced based on the genetics, and exposures and so forth, to bring together that complexity really requires a lot of data capabilities and computational prowess that is now coming together. We have that available. We have those kinds of capabilities to bring together in healthcare, in biotechnology innovation. And that will allow us to harness some of these multi-omics to hopefully, even though we do keep getting to deeper layers of complexity, to hopefully harness all of the interplay between those factors toward more precision approaches in the future. We've talked about cell and gene therapy. I think cell and gene therapy continues to be a very promising area. We think that there will be a lot of expansion in a field called theranostics. The idea behind theranostics is, if you've heard of a PET scan, that's really just a substance that is made to go to a particular protein or receptor on a cancer cell, and it's given enough radioactivity to quote unquote light up on the PET scan or the PET CT or PET MRI scan so that you can diagnose that someone does have a tumor and see where it is. Theranostics is just an extension of that, where that same thing that is homing in on the particular cancer cells is now labeled with enough radiation to actually treat the tumor. The radiation accumulates at the tumor and treats it. And this has been applied in prostate cancer and a few other things. There's a handful of things. But the pipeline of products and drugs that can be applied in theranostics is going to continue to grow. And one of the rate limiting steps has been that many times these have a very short half-life. The radiation wears off very quickly, so it has to be produced and it has to get to the place to treat the patient very quickly. And the larger pharma companies have not been terribly successful in being able to work those logistics well. And so now there are others that are trying to fill that void that can be more nimble and take care of that. One of them is a startup that Mayo Clinic is very deeply involved with called Nucleus Biopharma. And then finally, I think cellular engineering continues to get to better levels of complexity. And the fact that we can already take someone's immune cells out of their body and reprogram them to fight their cancer and then give them back into their body sounds like science fiction, but that will only grow in terms of capabilities and complexities and probably move upstream in the disease process. Engineering cells so that they can sense an abnormality in your body. Maybe we won't need wearables in the future because we have some of our cells reprogrammed to send a signal when something is going wrong, or those cells are engineered to respond with a protein that can keep the problem from ever taking hold. So those are some other things that I would add.
Great. Dr. Knox, do you have?
Is there anything to add?
Here?
You guys, I checked off a whole bunch on my mental list.
We went number one and number two. Sorry.
I do think, just in the spirit of Cami, that we really are invested in vaccines spawned by the pandemic, and now you can get a vaccine to market very quickly, but not vaccines only for viruses, but for cancers. And I think you've probably read in the media that there are many stories of success stories, like miraculous stories of people really curing their cancer through vaccine technology. I will say one other thing is that, at least in my world, single cell technology has really exploded, meaning we can look at cells at a single cell level, just like it sounds. But when we do that, we are also discovering new intermediate cells. So we used to lump all of our cells together, or we had like one or two categories of cells. And now we have hundreds of categories of cells, and understanding the biology of the disease and how those cells are formed and what are the progenitor cells and what cells are really implicated in disease processes, how many of these cells need to be there to restore all your function, like in cystic fibrosis for the CFTR receptor. I think that's very exciting.
That's great. So I'm going to go off script for a moment because, Dr. Gray, you brought up a topic that is of interest to us at Flinn, but also something we're hearing about more and more, and that's about data. We know our universities are focused on producing the next generation of data scientists. We know the proliferation of electronic medical records and all of the success and failure associated with that. And then we have regulation like HIPAA and other things that are really put in place to protect that data. What are the challenges? What are the wins? What are we seeing in that convergence of data? And where can we be successful or advance that?
Yeah, it's been very challenging in healthcare because we need to protect patients' data and protect patients' privacy. And to what degree you protect it is debated. How much information you need to remove. So you talked about electronic medical records, and you would say, wow, this is a beautiful amount of data for us to work with. However, a medical record may have a note that, yes, has a patient's name and date of birth and some things where you'd say, yeah, you have to strip that out. Mm-hmm. But if later in a clinician's note, it says, this is a 6'5" former college basketball player who works at Mayo Clinic, that might narrow it down enough that you can re-identify someone. And so the complexity of removing that kind of information to keep patient privacy so that we can make the data more structured and usable and successfully get innovations that come from it is extraordinarily difficult. And then you need enough data for it to be useful, not to make what I call mediocre technology. You can make an AI model from a relatively small amount of data that looks like it has all the bells and whistles, but it's not going to perform well because the data is not robust enough. And then when you're talking about patients, you also need a diversity of those patients, racially, ethnically, socioeconomic, lots of different pieces to come together. So that is going to require an incredible amount of collaboration and an incredible amount of wisdom in doing it in a safe and effective way. I happen to be a little biased, but I think Mayo Clinic has taken an approach that I believe will make a huge difference for all of healthcare. In 2019, we created something called Mayo Clinic Platform, and it was really designed to capture this moment with our computational prowess and AI abilities. And we began by creating what has become the world's first distributed data network, where multiple healthcare organizations from around the world can pool their data without it mixing together. It's a federated system. So those that join the platform cannot see Mayo Clinic data, we cannot see their data, but in aggregate, it can be used to train these models very effectively. And we call it data behind glass. It's third-party certified as de-identified, and the principles of the platform are: 1, we will never monetize patients' data. 2, anyone that participates in the platform, if you develop a solution from it, it stays on the platform and becomes available to anyone in the world who wants to tap into the platform and use that for the good of humanity. And that has resonated with people. And as I said, it's become now the largest data set in the world. We have Mayo Clinic, as I said, top-rated healthcare organization in the US. We have the top-rated healthcare organization in Canada on the platform, top-rated healthcare organization in South America, in the Middle East, in Singapore, soon to be India, et cetera, and a number of other US healthcare organizations. So we have the kind of data set now with the heterogeneity of patients to overcome some of those previous barriers. It's put in a format that is structured enough to develop solutions. And importantly, we've said this is a platform for the world to elevate all those things that are wrong right now. I think we all know we have in healthcare an affordability crisis, we have an access crisis, we have problems with health disparities. And so an example is from the platform, we developed an algorithm that for patients with head and neck cancer, when they need radiation treatments for that, you do a CAT scan, and then physicists and radiation oncologists develop a treatment plan. It's very complex in the head and neck. It took our Mayo Clinic physicists and radiation oncologists about 17 hours per plan to develop those. The algorithm now can take a CAT scan and just automatically make that plan. And it now takes our physicists and radiation oncologists 1 hour to check it, make sure it's good, apply human judgment, and then put it in place. That is now being made available on the platform so that any healthcare organization in the world can now take that. They can have Mayo Clinic level quality of radiation treatment plans and do it at 1/17th the effort that they ever did before. And if you think that's just one plan, so then if you think of the platform and the network effects and everybody on the platform and the solution developers that come developing hundreds and thousands and then hundreds of thousands of those solutions where we do things at higher quality, available to everyone, and at 1/17th the effort, now you start to have a little hope. Maybe we can make things more affordable. Maybe we can improve access and quality. Maybe we can decrease health disparities. So we're excited about where that's going. We have about 250 algorithms already working at Mayo Clinic to benefit patients and growing every day.
So does the platform have a name?
It's called Mayo Clinic Platform.
Okay.
So you're welcome to go to you're welcome to go to Mayo Clinic Platform, Mayo Clinic Platform online and read more about it. And importantly, it'll also be a validation center. So when President Biden announced Safe AI initiative, this will be, Mayo Clinic platform will be the first platform that is for validation. If somebody develops it not on the platform, but the FDA wants to certify that it's safe and valid for the population, it can go to Mayo Clinic platform. It'll be independently reviewed, applied to that population, checked for bias, checked for all of the things that we want to keep safe. And it can kind of put that United Laboratories stamp of approval that it's safe to go into effect.
Great. Great. So I want to move on, I guess, to another question here. And you've all touched on it, and especially with that last question. But I'll start with you, Dr. Knox. You know, a challenge that is being posed by all of these cutting-edge advances is the extraordinary cost. And, you know, we talked about the time that it takes. We talked about this possibility of, you know, there being some acceleration with this type of data. But what are the best avenues that you believe our healthcare systems can do to realize cost savings for patients, for providers, and for payers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, certainly telehealth is one example in which I think we can leverage to reach out to marginalized communities, but also to decrease cost in some respects. So I think that's one technology and platform that will be used more and more. I think as far as, I'll go off script a little bit and just say that first through the door drugs are extraordinarily expensive, and it's very difficult to get those to people who need it. So there's going to have to be, I don't have the solution, but there's going to have to be some answer to how that first drug through the door gets to people who need it in a more timely fashion, and the cost is just exorbitant. There's probably some people on the panel who could opine a little bit more about how we can do that. And then another barrier we have that's a little bit related is that first drug through the door to get to the clinical trial piece is sometimes now standard of care, even though the drug isn't that great. And then we have to design trials that allow people to have standard of care, and then we're forcing ourselves to do add-on trials as opposed to head-to-head trials. So there's a lot of complexity there, that increased cost. So I think telehealth is going to really transform what we do with patients.
Yeah, Mohammad, do you want to weigh in on that?
I'll touch on what Dr. Knox said. Coming from pharma background, we all know the fact that it costs around $1 billion for a drug to reach the market. If we really look why that absorbent cost is there, it's mainly because of all the failed trials that's actually led to that one successful drug to make it to the market. So at the end of the day, from a cost point of view, when you look at it from a company standpoint of view, I need to recoup basically that cost that led to that success of the drug. Now, with the innovation that we've been talking about, the multidisciplinary work and research that is being done, and as I mentioned about the bioprinting, the AI, when you merge these technologies together, then the cost of developing a drug and basically the chance of success goes up tremendously, which at the end of the day gonna allow pharma companies to basically be able to provide that drug to patients and hospitals at a very reasonable and affordable price. So I think it all starts when reducing the cost of a healthcare, whether it's a mid device or it's a drug. It starts from the early process of working in multidisciplinary approach to combine different technologies that not only expedite the development but really reduce the cost. So at the end of the day, that basically saving reach to the patient and to the overall community.
Great.
Yeah, I agree. The ability of data to give us better targets, to use synthetic patients, their data as controls with all of this will be very helpful. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, I think when you take a platform approach also, you have no idea how those downstream benefits will start to occur and make some inroads on those things. So I'll quickly give one more example that Another algorithm that was developed on Mayo Clinic platform was to predict heart failure. So it's pretty common for people to get an EKG, and that looks at the electrical rhythms of the heart. But the really dangerous thing is heart failure. And that means the muscle of the heart is not pumping adequately to have the blood flow go around. And what happens is people get very symptomatic and deep into heart failure before it's recognized usually. So on the platform, our cardiologist said, we've got all this data on EKGs, we got all this data on this other test for heart failure, echocardiograms. Can we, with machine learning, say, look at these EKGs, all of the patients who later developed heart failure, is there something in that EKG that can tell us they're the person that's going to have that happen so we can intervene sooner? And in fact, it created an algorithm that could effectively predict heart failure before it's symptomatic, and you can intervene and try to not get them there, which of course can help save costs. So we thought this was great. But because it's on a platform and then others are able to work with it, and it's a bit of an open source type of situation, people said, well, that's great from an EKG, but could we do that with Cardia Mobile, that thing you see on TV with 2 fingers on something? Can we do it from a 2-lead EKG instead of a 12-lead? And they were able to take it to that. And then someone said, how about an Apple Watch? And they were able to take it from that. And then importantly, to what we were talking about in terms of health disparities and the incredible cost, someone from Nigeria said, our problem is we have women after childbirth who go into heart failure. Is it possible that just the heart monitors we put on women during childbirth in Nigeria could use this algorithm to predict who is going to end up with postpartum heart failure in our lower developed nation that doesn't have the resources once they are in heart failure to get them a heart transplant and other things that happen? And in fact, the algorithm could be repurposed that way, and again, could help prevent some of that heart failure. So that's one example of how the network effects of saying, we've got a solution, now apply it in a different way, think of it a different way, spread it here, spread it there, repurpose it, hopefully can accelerate some of those cost-saving approaches.
That's a great example, and I like that you use that example to address health disparities. We know they exist. We know they exist here in Arizona. We see different populations affected differently by certain health risks. And beyond the cost savings that we're talking about, Dr. Knox, I heard you mention telemedicine, which we know emerged more strongly during the pandemic, but has the ability to get perhaps specialists to rural areas where they otherwise wouldn't be able to go. What else should we be thinking about with respect to access to quality care and reduction of health disparities?
Well, access is the key word. You can't have anything without access. Quality, you can't have a meaningful, obviously, encounter without access. So that's critical. Telehealth is an obvious one. I think also, and a lot of time we'll do this in some of our research studies, but also there's mobile vans that go around to areas that may not be served as readily as in the city. And there's a lot of initiatives going around about bringing the healthcare to the individual as opposed to having someone come down to the clinic or fight traffic, takes them 45 minutes. Who likes going to the doctor? Anyone? So it's difficult. But I do like the concept of bringing the physician or the technology to the community or to the patient.
Great. Dr. Albanna, do you want to comment on that?
I totally agree on this. From a business point of view, touching also on the reducing the cost, the idea that we can offer to our employees that you can actually talk to a physician from your office and they can prescribe medication for you. It's actually very great thing for us because it's basically not only they have access to a doctor immediately, but also it saves us a lot of cost because we have employees still working. It might be just hey, you have nothing, you just need to relax or get some Tylenol. So from an access point of view, this actually helps a lot with keeping innovation moving, keeping research moving, and also from a cost point of view for employer in terms of benefits and so on. It's actually keep it contained for us as we are growing and able to offer more expanded benefits for employees.
Great.
And in our collaboration discussion, I think another thing, Tammy, is for us to collaborate between developed nations, high development index nations, and low development index nations to look back at what has happened in the history of the high development index nations, how those risks have changed over time, how that changed the health of our population, and recognize that some of these lower development index nations are on that same curve. And let's not just let them follow the same path. So, in the United States, we've had great breakthroughs. We've decreased cancer incidence by 15% over the last few decades, and cancer mortality by 27%. But cancer incidence is much higher in high development index nations than in low development index nations. Now, in part because of how long people live, in part because we have screening programs that identify and diagnose it, but it's also some of the things that have happened during development. Low development index nations have lower incidence of cancer, but higher mortality because it gets diagnosed late. And so they're on a trajectory that we've gone on. We need to really collaborate and say, let's just not try to improve our situation from where we are now, but look back to see what could we have done earlier in this process, and then how might this be applied to low development index nations, and quite frankly, to poor communities within our own nation.
That's terrific. Well, there is no access without health professionals on the other end of that. So let's just close out by talking about how we confront with respect to finding and retaining talent, and how are each of you responding to that? And in particular, I would say, is there any best model for workforce preparation that we should be thinking about in our community? So, Dr. Knox, I know it's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, well, one of my hats is Vice Dean for Academic and Faculty Affairs, and we run an in-house recruitment operation, and have a great team doing that. And again, it's all about people and bringing the talent to both scientific and health delivery related talent to the area. It's difficult. It's competitive out there. I think we have to create pathways to let all people come through the doors. So there are some people who want to be a tenured professor. We need to be able to offer that. There are some people who could care less about being a tenured professor, but want to deliver great health care, and we need to have a door for. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, at least from the academic side, where we can offer people doors to walk through that make sense to them and resonate with them, so they can get on with their professional careers and have an identity.
Great. I know you're adding 75 new researchers at least out there.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly been on this trajectory. So just here in Arizona at Mayo Clinic over the last 2 years, we've hired over 200 physicians and scientists and over 5,000 staff total. And, to find great people, we're in a fortunate position. I'll just say that first. Mayo Clinic has a wonderful culture. We have wonderful people. Attracting good talent has not been a big barrier for us, but we've done a lot of things intentionally. We have 5 schools within Mayo Clinic. 50% of our physicians have had some form of Mayo Clinic training along the way. So we help our own pipeline, but we're able to bring in good talent. I think there's 2 things that maybe I would touch on. One is we've just talked about all this technology and wrangling data and how do you deal with AI. And I think all of us across healthcare and biotechnology innovation are going to have to wrestle with how do we increase the capabilities of people that are already in the workforce for this new reality. And so we've approached it at Mayo Clinic, for example, by not centralizing some of our AI efforts, but saying, hey, every department and every division and every place, you need to build up your own AI capabilities. And we'll have some central resources that will help teach you to fish rather than giving you a fish, but we'll develop those, and we have career investment programs and other things to upskill individuals. So I think we'll have to not only keep the talent pipelines and all the collaborations with our great universities and other things to fill that pipeline, but we'll have to upskill our own people. And then we're going to have to wrestle with the maldistribution of the talent. So as I said, we haven't had a lot of problems attracting talent to Mayo Clinic. But if you talk about a rural, underserved community in remote areas of Arizona, and you're trying to bring specialty care there, and especially nowadays when often physicians are in 2 physician families or at least 2 professional career families, and there need to be great opportunities for both of those individuals in that community, it is really a struggle to see how we're going to make big inroads in that. And so we're going to have to be creative, both about economic diversification of some of our more rural areas, but also how technology can overcome it. So, we have a program with a telestroke program. And so we have robots that sit in emergency departments across Arizona and other states. And our stroke neurologists are on call and help cover that. And they have the ability to, with that robot, visualize the patient, basically direct an exam, and at least give an initial assessment of, yes, this is a stroke patient. This is what needs to be done initially. Let's get them to a stroke center, or no, it's not. So there are going to be some technology solutions, but we also need some societal solutions as well.
Great. I mentioned at the beginning of our talk today that the Flinn Foundation is the steward of the Arizona Bioscience Roadmap. The current roadmap is coming to a conclusion, but the board has fortunately agreed that we should look at the continuation of that plan. We have an entrepreneur, health system CEO, someone from the University of Arizona sitting here. If I was to launch that next plan tomorrow, who's missing? Give me just a title or a name or who else do I need to have in that conversation?
I think someone, I would say, from the policymaker,
Okay.
State level.
All right. Policymaker, Dr. Gray?
I think that's a good one. And then I think you've got the right breadth of it. It's just having enough diversity within some of those categories, I think, is going to be important as well.
Great. Dr. Knox?
I'll go with regulatory and maybe even legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed this conversation, and thanks to all of you for being here today. Appreciate it.